The emergency beacon pulsed through the perpetual twilight of Kepler 186f, its erratic rhythm breaking the monotony of Dr. Sarah Chen's evening routine at Research Station Omega. She lowered her microscope's eyepiece, the bioluminescent samples forgotten as she pulled up the signal's coordinates on her holo display. The beacon's signature wasn't human. It wasn't anything in their database. "Control, this is Dr. Chen." She spoke into her comm unit. "I'm picking up an anomalous signal in Sector 7. Requesting permission to investigate." Static crackled before Dr. Morris's voice came through. "Negative, Doctor. Protocol dictates we wait for the security team's return from their patrol route. They're due back in 6 hours." Sarah glanced at the signal's deteriorating pattern. Whatever was out there wouldn't last 6 hours. "With respect, sir, if this is a biological entity, we could be looking at the first sentient contact in this sector. By the time security returns, we might lose something irreplaceable." More static, then a resigned sigh. "You have 1 hour, Chen. Take the emergency kit and keep your beacon active. Any sign of danger, you return immediately." The trek through Kepler's twisted forests took 20 minutes in her exosuit. The planet's red dwarf star cast everything in perpetual sunset, making the bioluminescent flora glow like fallen stars. The signal led her to a ravine where the trees parted, revealing something that stopped her breath. A ship lay half buried in the rusty soil, its design unlike anything in human records. The hull seemed to ripple like liquid metal, even damaged as it was. But it was the figure slumped against the ship's side that drew her forward. Humanoid, but clearly alien. Its skin had a crystalline quality, refracting the dim light in prismatic patterns, and what she first took for clothing appeared to be retractable plates growing from its body. Sarah approached slowly, her suit's sensors confirming the atmosphere was safe as she lowered her helmet's opacity. The being's eyes snapped open. Horizontal pupils in silver irises tracked her movement with startling intelligence. "Easy," she said, raising her empty hands. "I'm here to help." The alien's mouth moved, producing sounds that her translator couldn't process, but the universal gesture of pain was clear as it clutched its side, where the crystalline plates were cracked and leaking a phosphorescent fluid. Sarah activated her medical scanner, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm a doctor, a healer. Will you let me look at your injury?" The being studied her for a long moment before inclining its head in what she hoped was assent. As she knelt beside it, her scanner revealed an internal structure that defied conventional biology. Crystalline matrices instead of organs, energy pathways instead of blood vessels. "Remarkable," she breathed. "Your entire cellular structure." The alien made another sound, this one almost like laughter. It reached out with a multi-jointed hand and touched her scanner, its fingers moving in precise patterns. The device's display flickered, then reformed with new characters she didn't recognize. "You're rewriting my software," she realized. "You understand our technology." The being nodded, then pointed to itself. "Qatar," it said, the sound sharp and musical. Then it pointed to her. "Sarah," she replied. "Sarah Chen." Qatar's pupils dilated, and they began manipulating her scanner again. Words appeared in English. "Danger coming. Must hide." Danger? From what? But before Qatar could answer, a new sound cut through the twilight, the deep thrum of approaching ships. Much larger ships. Qatar's crystalline plates rattled in what Sarah recognized as fear. Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of human history. "Can you walk?" "My research station is shielded. We can make it if we hurry." Qatar hesitated, then took her offered hand. Their skin was cool to the touch, smooth like polished stone. As she helped them up, Sarah's comm crackled to life. "Chen, we're picking up multiple vessels entering the atmosphere." Dr. Morris's voice was tense. "Return to base immediately." "Already on my way, sir," she replied. "And I'm bringing a guest. Tell medical to prepare for xenobiology triage." "You found something." "Chen, what?" She cut him off as she helped Qatar through the forest, their crystalline form casting rainbow refractions through the bioluminescent underbrush. Above them, massive shadows began to blot out the stars. "Trust me," she said to both Qatar and her unseen supervisor. "This is bigger than our protocols." As they hurried through the alien landscape, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She was about to bring an unknown species into humanity's most advanced research station in this sector. Everything she'd been taught about first contact procedures screamed against it, but there was something in Qatar's silver eyes, an intelligence, a desperation, that transcended species. They reached the station just as the first of the large ships breached the cloud layer. As the airlock cycled, Sarah watched Qatar stare at the approaching vessels, their crystalline body trembling with what might have been rage or fear. "Whatever's coming," she said quietly, "you're not alone anymore." Qatar turned those alien eyes to her, and for a moment, Sarah saw something that would change her understanding of life itself. Not just intelligence, but wisdom, fear, hope, and gratitude, all expressed through the subtle shifts of living crystal. The airlock opened, and they stepped into humanity's first chapter of a much larger story. Behind them, the ships descended like gathering storm clouds, and Sarah knew that her simple decision to answer a distress beacon would ripple across the stars in ways she couldn't imagine. What she couldn't know, was that this moment would be taught in schools across two civilizations for generations to come. The day a human scientist chose compassion over protocol, and in doing so, changed the fate of two species forever. The medical bay of Research Station Omega hummed with activity as Sarah worked to understand Qatar's unique physiology. 3 days had passed since their dramatic arrival, and the massive ships that had pursued them remained in orbit, silent and threatening. Qatar's crystalline form lay on the examination table, their phosphorescent fluids now properly contained within sealed fractures. "Your healing rate is extraordinary," Sarah murmured, reviewing the latest scans. "The crystalline matrices are self-repairing at a molecular level." Qatar had modified more of their equipment, creating an interface that allowed them to communicate through text. "Our bodies adapt," appeared on the nearby screen. "Like your evolution, but faster. Each generation changes to survive." Dr. Morris stood at the observation window, his usual scientific detachment warring with wonder. "The Council wants answers," he said. "Those ships up there haven't responded to any attempts at communication. We need to know what we're dealing with." Qatar's plates shifted, creating a sound like wind through crystal chimes. New text scrolled across the screen. "They are the Nexus. Once my people were like them, rigid, unchanging. We chose to evolve. They chose to remain pure. Now they hunt us, the changed ones, seeing us as corruption of their perfect form." Sarah's hands stilled on her instruments. "You're refugees. Explorers," Qatar corrected. "Seeking others who understand change is necessary. Your species, humans, you change constantly. Your bodies, your society, your technology. You embrace evolution. That's why you let me help you," Sarah realized. "You recognize something in us." The door slid open as Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's quantum physicist, rushed in. "We've detected energy buildups in the orbital ships," she announced, her usual calm demeanor cracked by urgency. "They're charging weapons." Qatar rose from the examination table, their crystalline form catching the light in new patterns, harder, sharper. "They will not fire," the text appeared. "Not while I am here. I carry something they want." Sarah stepped between Qatar and the observation window, where the alien ships loomed like distant thunderheads. "What do you carry that's so important they'd track you across the stars?" Qatar's hand moved to their chest, where the crystalline plates parted to reveal a core of swirling energy. "The future," they typed. "The key to controlled evolution. My people learned to guide our changes, to choose our adaptations. The Nexus fears this power in anyone's hands but their own." Alarms began to blare throughout the station. Dr. Morris's comm unit crackled with multiple voices reporting energy spikes from the orbital ships. But Sarah barely heard them, transfixed by the swirling light within Qatar's chest cavity. "You're not just carrying the knowledge," she whispered. "You're living proof of it. Your entire body is an evolutionary experiment." "Yes," Qatar responded. "And now I must choose again." Their silver eyes met Sarah's. "Your station's shields cannot withstand their weapons, but I can share what I know. Human adaptability combined with our controlled evolution. Together, we could show both our peoples a new path." Dr. Morris stepped forward. "You're talking about changing human biology. That's beyond any ethical protocols we have." "Ethics evolve too," Sarah countered, her mind racing ahead to implications both terrible and wonderful. "Tar, what exactly are you proposing?" The crystalline being's text appeared more slowly now, each word weighted with significance. "A bridge between our species. My knowledge of controlled evolution merged with human genetic science. Not to change what you are, but to expand what you can become. What we can become together." Outside, the orbital ships began to descend through the atmosphere, their massive forms now visible through the station's windows. Car's plates rippled with urgency as they typed. "The Nexus fears this most of all, species working together, sharing knowledge, growing stronger through cooperation rather than purity. They will destroy this station rather than allow it." Sarah looked at her fellow scientists. Morris with his rigid protocols, Yuki with her quantum calculations, the others who had gathered at the windows. Then she looked at Qatar, an impossible being of living crystal who had trusted her enough to share the greatest scientific discovery in human history. "How long do you need?" she asked. Qatar's pupils contracted. "To transfer the knowledge." "Hours. To demonstrate its potential." "Moments." The station shook as the first warning shots from the Nexus ships struck their shields. Dr. Morris grabbed Sarah's arm. "Chen, whatever you're thinking." "I volunteer." She cut him off, turning to Qatar. "Show them. Show everyone what cooperation between species can achieve." Qatar's crystalline form began to glow from within, the swirling energy in their core intensifying. "It will change you," the text warned. "Not just your body, but your understanding of what is possible." Sarah thought of all the times humanity had stood at crossroads like this, moments when fear could have held them back from the next great leap. She thought of the first humans to tame fire, to cross oceans, to reach for the stars. "Change is what we do best," she said, and stepped forward to meet her evolution. The Nexus ships drew closer, their weapons charging for a killing blow, unaware that below them, in a small research station on a twilight world, two species were about to prove that the future belonged not to those who resisted change, but to those who embraced it together. Light poured from the medical bay of Research Station Omega, casting prismatic patterns across the twilight world of Kepler 186f. Inside, Sarah Chen felt her consciousness expand as Qatar's evolutionary knowledge merged with her human DNA. Her skin began to shimmer with an opalescent sheen, while her mind opened to understanding beyond anything she'd imagined possible. "Remarkable," Dr. Yuki whispered, her instruments struggling to measure the transformation. "The quantum signatures. It's as if her atomic structure is learning to exist in multiple states simultaneously." Dr. Morris watched in stunned silence as crystalline patterns bloomed beneath Sarah's skin, not replacing her human biology, but enhancing it, creating something entirely new. Through it all, Qatar maintained their connection, their own crystalline form resonating with Sarah's changing body. "The shields are at 20%. The station's defense officer called through the comm. Above them, the Nexus ships had surrounded the station, their weapons charging for a final assault. Sarah opened her eyes, now shimmering with the same silver light as Qatar's. "I can feel them," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics. "The Nexus, they're so afraid. Generations of enforced stasis, terrified of the chaos of change." She turned to Qatar. "Show me how to reach them." Qatar's response appeared on the screen. Together. Their ships are crystalline technology, like my body. Like your new self, we can resonate with their systems. Sarah stood, her transformed body moving with fluid grace. Where her feet touched the floor, crystalline patterns spread like frost. Dr. Morris, evacuate all non-essential personnel to the lower levels. Yuki, I need you to modify the station's communication array to match the frequency I'm about to show you. As the station shook with another impact, Sarah and Qatar moved in perfect synchronization to the main control room. Their combined knowledge flowed through the station's systems, rewriting protocols that had seemed immutable moments before. What we're about to do, Sarah explained as her fingers danced across the controls, leaving trails of luminescence, is show the Nexus their own potential. Every crystalline structure can evolve, even their ships, even their own bodies. They'd just forgotten how. The station's shields flickered, nearly depleted. Through the viewport, the Nexus ships loomed like avalanches waiting to fall. Sarah felt their crew's consciousness, rigid, orderly, and beneath it all desperately lonely in their self-imposed isolation. Now, she whispered to Qatar. They pressed their hands to the control panel together. Energy surged through the station's modified communications array, carrying with it the quantum signature of their combined evolution. The beam struck the nearest Nexus ship, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's crystalline hull began to change. Colors rippled across its surface, not the corruption the Nexus feared, but the blossoming of possibility. The ship's crew felt their own bodies respond, centuries of suppressed potential awakening. They're receiving it. Qatar's text scrolled. The knowledge, the understanding. But the other ships. Before they could finish, the remaining Nexus vessels opened fire. The station's shields collapsed under the barrage. Emergency sirens blared as hull breaches were reported across multiple decks. Sarah felt the station's systems failing around them. More importantly, she felt the fear and rage from the unchanged Nexus ships. They would destroy this station and everyone in it, rather than risk the spread of evolution. She turned to Qatar, understanding flowing between them without need for screens or words. The station's reactor, she said. We can use it to amplify the signal, reach all the ships at once. But Qatar nodded, their silver eyes holding infinite sadness. The price would be high. The energy required would destroy the station's reactor core and change whoever channeled it beyond any hope of return. I'll do it, Sarah said, but Qatar was already moving toward the reactor control room. No appeared on the screen one last time. You are the bridge, Sarah Chen. You carry both our species' potential now. Live. Show them what we can become. Before she could react, Qatar sealed the reactor room, their crystalline form beginning to glow with blinding intensity. Sarah felt their consciousness touch hers one final time, sharing not words but pure emotion, hope, trust, and something deeper that transcended species. The reactor's energy surged through Qatar's crystalline body, amplified by their evolved form. A pulse of pure possibility erupted from the station, washing over the Nexus fleet. Ship by ship, their rigid structures awakened to change. When the light faded, the reactor room was empty. Where Qatar had stood, only a small cluster of perfect crystals remained, humming with lingering energy. Sarah knelt to gather them, her transformed hands cupping them gently. Above the station, the Nexus ships hung motionless, their hulls shifting with new awareness. Their crew's consciousness reached out, no longer rigid and fearful, but awake to their own potential for growth. Sarah stood in the wreckage of the station, her body bridging two species' worth of evolution, and felt the weight of what she had become. Qatar's sacrifice had saved them all, but had also ensured that she would never fully belong to either world again. As the station's crew emerged from shelter, staring in wonder at their transformed colleague and the changed ships above, Sarah clutched the crystals to her chest. She would honor Qatar's gift by doing what humans had always done best, adapting, growing, and showing others the way forward. even if that way forward was more lonely than she had ever imagined it could be. 10 years after the events at Research Station Omega, Sarah Chen stood before the curved windows of Harmony Station, watching ships from a dozen species dock at its crystalline ports. Her transformed body caught the light from a nearby binary star system, sending rainbow refractions across the observation deck's walls. She no longer needed the primitive text interfaces to communicate with crystalline-based life forms. Her evolved form could resonate directly with their consciousness, making her the most sought-after diplomat in human space. Yet she remained apart, not fully human anymore, but not truly crystalline either. Dr. Chen, her eye assistant's voice chimed softly. The Nexus delegation requests your presence in Conference Chamber 3. They say it's urgent. Sarah smiled slightly. Everything was urgent to the Nexus now that they'd embraced change. Their society had transformed from rigid isolationists to enthusiastic explorers, though they still struggled with the concept of patience. As she made her way through the station's corridors, other diplomats and scientists stepped aside respectfully. Some watched her with barely concealed fascination. She was, after all, living proof that evolution could be guided, that species could transcend their original forms. The conference chamber doors slid open to reveal 3 Nexus representatives, their crystalline forms shimmering with the complex patterns that had become common since Qatar's sacrifice. But it was the 4th figure that made Sarah freeze in the doorway. Standing before her was a being she had never seen before, yet felt she should recognize. Their form was primarily crystalline, like the Nexus, but moved with organic fluidity like her own. And their eyes, they held the same silver light as Qatar's had, but within them burned a familiar human intensity. "Hello, Mother," the being said, their voice carrying both crystalline harmonics and human warmth. "I'm Nova." Sarah's transformed heart skipped a beat. "That's impossible," she whispered, even as her evolved senses told her it was true. This being carried signatures of both her DNA and Qatar's crystalline patterns. The eldest Nexus representative stepped forward. When Qatar merged their essence with the reactor core, they did not merely sacrifice themselves. They seeded their genetic material with a final purpose. Using the knowledge they had shared with you, they encoded a new possibility, one that would only emerge when we were ready to understand it. "We found the pattern hidden in the reactor crystals," another Nexus added. "It took us years to decode it, and more years to understand what Qatar had done. They left instructions for combining their genetic material with yours, creating a true bridge between our species." Nova moved closer, their movement a graceful blend of human and crystalline motion. Qatar knew that just changing forms wasn't enough. Real understanding between species requires something more. It requires family. Sarah reached out with trembling fingers to touch Nova's face. The moment their skin made contact, she felt it. The resonance of Qatar's consciousness, preserved and reborn through their child, mixed with her own genetic legacy. Tears fell from her silver eyes, each drop crystallizing before it hit the floor. "How much of them is in you?" she asked softly. "How much do you remember?" Nova's form shifted, revealing swirling patterns of energy beneath their crystalline surface. "I have their knowledge, their memories, but I'm not them. I'm something new, what they hoped our species could become together. A proof that evolution doesn't have to mean losing what we were, but can mean becoming more than we ever imagined." The Nexus representatives watched the reunion with their own form of emotion, their crystalline bodies resonating with harmonies that spoke of hope and possibility. One of them stepped forward again. "There's more," they said. "Nova's existence proves something we suspected but couldn't confirm. The evolutionary patterns Qatar unlocked, they're not limited to our 2 species. Every form of life we've encountered carries the potential for guided evolution. We've been so focused on our own transformation that we missed the larger pattern." Sarah looked at her child, this impossible, wonderful being that represented everything she and Qatar had dreamed of. "What larger pattern?" Nova's eyes shimmered with excitement. "The universe itself is evolving, Mother, And we're not just part of it. We're conscious participants in its transformation. Qatar didn't just give us the key to changing ourselves. They showed us how to help guide the very process of cosmic evolution. As Sarah stood there, one hand still touching Nova's crystalline cheek, she felt the weight of 10 years of loneliness lift from her shoulders. She wasn't a bridge between two species anymore. She was part of something far larger, a mother to possibilities that stretched beyond the stars themselves. And somewhere, in the quantum resonance that connected all crystalline consciousness, she felt Qatar's presence echo through their child, carrying a message of love that transcended death, transformation, and the very boundaries of what life could become. The news of Nova's existence spread through the galaxy like a quantum wave, impossible to contain and equally impossible to ignore. 3 months after their reunion on Harmony Station, Sarah Chen stood with her child before the combined council of species, representing not just humanity or the crystalline races, but a future none of them had imagined possible. The council chamber was a marvel of collaborative engineering, its architecture adapting to accommodate the needs of each species present. Sarah's evolved senses could feel the hopes and fears radiating from the assembled representatives, organic, crystalline, and everything in between. "What you're proposing," the Archon of the Meridian Collective spoke, their bioluminescent form pulsing with concern, "is not just guided evolution of individual species, but a coordinated transformation of all spacefaring civilizations." Nova stepped forward, their form shifting to better project their voice to all present. "Evolution has always been coordinated," they said, their tone carrying both Qatar's crystalline harmonics and Sarah's human passion. "Every species in this chamber evolved in response to each other, to their environments, to the very physics of our universe. What we're proposing is to make that process conscious, collaborative." Sarah watched her child with pride. Nova had inherited more than just their parents' combined genetics. They had inherited a vision of what life could become when it chose to grow together rather than apart. "And what of those who choose not to participate?" asked the representative of the Silicon Mines, their holographic form flickering with calculated probability patterns. "What becomes of species that wish to remain as they are?" Sarah stepped forward to stand beside her child. "That choice will always remain sacred," she said, her transformed voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Qatar and the Nexus taught us that evolution without consent is no evolution at all. It's just another form of stagnation." She held up her hand, letting her skin shift between human and crystalline states. "Look at me. I chose this change, and it cost me my place in human society. But it also showed me that belonging isn't about maintaining a fixed form. It's about growing together, about choosing to face the universe's challenges as one." The chamber erupted in overlapping communications, radio waves, quantum signals, crystalline resonances, and organic chemicals, all carrying the same mix of excitement and fear. Nova absorbed it all, their form glowing with the intensity of their response. "We are not here to erase what makes each of us unique," they declared. "We're here to show you what becomes possible when we share our strengths." The Nexus feared change until they saw its beauty. Humans feared the unknown until they learned to embrace it. Every species in this chamber has overcome similar fears to reach the stars. Sarah felt a familiar resonance within the crystals she still carried from Qatar's sacrifice. She held them up, letting their light join with Nova's glow. "My former mate died believing that evolution was not just about survival, but about transcendence. They proved that love could bridge the gap between species, that consciousness could survive transformation, that life itself could become more than the sum of its parts." Nova began to resonate with the crystals, their form emanating patterns of pure possibility. The chamber's adaptive architecture responded, its surfaces beginning to shift and flow with new potential. Many of the representatives gasped or emitted their species' equivalent expressions of awe. "We stand at a crossroads," Nova continued, their voice now carrying echoes of all their inherited memories, human determination, crystalline wisdom, and something entirely new. Not just as individual species, but as life itself. The universe is not static. It evolves, it grows, it becomes. We can either be passive participants in that process, or we can learn to guide it together. Sarah watched as understanding began to spread through the chamber. She could feel the quantum connections forming between species that had never been able to communicate before, could see the first glimpses of what they might all become together. My human mother and my crystalline parent proved that the impossible was merely the first step toward a new reality. Nova said, their form now pulsing with the combined energy of their dual heritage. They showed us that evolution doesn't erase what we are. It reveals what we can become. The Silicon Mind's representative flickered with new calculations. The computational possibilities of guided quantum evolution across multiple species. It approaches infinity. That's exactly the point. Sarah smiled. Evolution isn't just about changing forms or upgrading systems. It's about expanding the very boundaries of what's possible. Every species here evolved to answer different questions about existence. Together, we can start asking entirely new questions. Nova raised their hands, and the crystals Sarah held rose into the air, their light spreading to touch every representative in the chamber. Through their shared connection, Sarah felt Kar's final gift unfolding. Not just the ability to change, but the wisdom to change together, to grow not in isolation, but in harmony. The future doesn't belong to any one species, Nova declared, their voice carrying the weight of both their heritage and their hope. It belongs to all of us together. We are the universe becoming conscious of its own evolution. And this is just the beginning. As the combined Council of Species began to vote on the proposal for collaborative evolution, Sarah looked at her child, this living bridge between worlds, and felt Kar's presence stronger than ever. They had been right all those years ago. The greatest power in the universe wasn't in resistance to change or in changing alone. It was in changing together, in choosing to face the infinite possibilities of existence, not as separate species, but as life itself, eternally growing, eternally becoming, eternally transcending what it had been before. The future they had dreamed of was finally beginning, and it was more beautiful than any of them could have imagined alone.